I have been an air-cooled guy for as long as I can remember, from using the Intel stock cooler to the AMD stock cooler to a fairly inexpensive Thermaltake UX200 cooler. I have loved air as much as my nose loves it. Not to mention, I am a lazy guy and replacing the liquid at some point in the future seems like a lot of work to me. But all of a sudden I had to change my attitude as MSI decided to send over this big boy. Liquid coolers are it, in terms of everything. MSI is one of the big players when it comes to the PC tech scenario. They make some of the best products out there, and thus it is very common that recently they have decided to shift to manufacturing other hardware like cooling stuff as well. The cooler that we have with us today is the MAG Coreliquid 360R. MAG, or MSI Arsenal Gaming, is the more value-oriented product lineup from the company. That is evident from the very aggressive pricing of this cooler at around 10,800 to 11,000 INR or around $120 in online stores. This places this cooler at the same segment as the Deepcool Castle 360EX White and the Lion Galahad 360 Black. Both of these coolers are available at ± 1000 INR. But the question is, how effective is it? Is it really good enough? The cooler comes in a very decent white box. Although it may get invariably dirty when kept on store shelves without proper maintenance, which it already has, it can look awesome when it is clean. The unboxing experience was really one of a kind. Inside we have everything packed in proper plastic packages. We have the radiator and the CPU blockhead and the 400mm tubing pre-attached, 3 120mm stock fans that are quite capable of cooling an average consumer build. Probably the max we can do is add another 3 fans to complete the push-pull configuration of this cooler. Along with the major components, we also get mounting hardware for possibly every relevant and known CPU socket to mankind for Intel, AMD and Threadrippers. Although we think this cooler won't be enough to cool a Threadripper. Along with that, we get a plastic bag full of PWM splitter, RGB connectors, several screws, bolts and washers and a noise reducer cable. I will get back to this later in the video. Taking a closer look at the cooler, we find some interesting design decisions. The pump is on the radiator instead of the CPU blockhead. That suggests that this cooler isn't from the Asetek ODM. It is from a rather less known Alpatec or Apple Cool. NZXT used designs from this ODM in their M series, which is a single 120mm model in it, the M22. It is as well known for using this ODM as it is for M stands from mediocrity jokes. But hold on a second, that doesn't mean this cooler is bad. Well, MSI and Apple Cool did really work a lot, and this is probably as good as Apple Cool gets, which isn't very good. The CPU blockhead is circular, which many of you might confuse for an Asetek cooler, but this is from Apple Cool. Probably MSI did really try to make it look as Asetek as possible. But the CPU blockhead is interesting. It is rotatable, which means you can ensure that the MSI logo is always upright and not care about it while mounting this cooler. This is another benefit of not having the pump in the CPU blockhead, and it does really make installation a lot easier. The CPU blockhead also has a 3-pin RGB connector. That means you can either choose to have RGB or go full stealth mode. Well, the bad news is that I screwed up the RGB connector. Sorry MSI, I didn't really mean to do that. The tubing is well built. It is 400mm long. That means installation in probably any standard case won't be a problem at all, and it does not matter which direction you want to mount the cooler in. MSI does claim that the tube is constructed with 3 layers of netted plastic and a reinforced mesh exterior. MSI also claims that this tube is evaporation proof, which if true is really awesome. Moving on to the radiator, we find an old school third port. This port is for filling and burping. This can also be used to add a small reservoir to the liquid radiator if you really want to. But the pump is very small and it is built only to handle a closed sealed loop. But since you have a third port, you can also mount a secondary DDC or a D5 to help things out. The rest of it is a regular aluminum radiator with a fins per inch of 9 to 10. The chassis is 12mm thick and the actual radiator is 11.6mm thick. The radiator did come with a few nice dents in it. Those may have been caused during earlier usage and won't hurt cooling in a very significant way. Moving over to the fans, they are quite well built. They have 9 fins in them and have a wide operating range of 500 to 2000 RPM according to MSI. All of the fans come armed with both male and female 5V ARGB connectors and a separate PWM connector. They can move upwards of 78.73 CFM of air. And along with 2-ball bearing and ARGB, they are very good in terms of stock fans. This cooler is different. Now let us put this into test and check how much of that difference translates to real-world performance. Mounting this cooler was easy and user-friendly. Kudos to MSI for designing such an user-friendly mechanism to mount your coolers. I will not show the entire mounting mechanism in this video. For AMD, the mounting hardware is fairly simple, and for Intel, you do need a lot of stuff to mount this cooler. The finished looks of this cooler in a case is awesome. I like it. It is plush with RGB and lights up your case like an absolute maniac. The RGB on the fans and the blockhead are bright enough. Okay, time for some test results. The test bench that we will use includes the Ryzen 5 3600 on stock 3.6 to 4.2 GHz. The processor sits on the B450 Steel Legend motherboard from ASRock. The thermal paste that we will use is the Cooler Master Master Gel Pro. We will use the ADATA XPG Spectrix D40 memory, 268GB each at 2400 MHz overclocked to 3000 MHz. And for the graphics card, we will use the MSI GTX 1650 Ventus XSoC because the processor does not have onboard graphics. The power supply that we will use includes the Cooler Master MWE 550W 80+ white. For storage, we are going for the Crucial MX500 1TB SATA SSD. All of this setup will sit in OpenAir for a more unified test result. The test methodology includes the comparison of the 360R in the auto mode. We will compare that by ramping the fan speeds all the way up to 2000 RPM, and we'll compare these results with the push-pull setup with the GameGS Aeolus M2 fans, and we will compare these 3 results with pushing the fans full to 2000 RPM on the push-pull as well. Finally, we will compare these results with the results established by the Thermaltake UX200 cooler and the AMD stock cooler, which for me is the Wrath Steeled cooler. Okay, jumping in, let's begin the test results, shall we? I have prepared a chart representing all the results of the thorough testing that we did. Remember, all these temps are over ambient. That means you need to add 25 to 26 degrees to get the real world temperatures that we recorded. While the UX200 and the Wrath Steel did perform as expected, the numbers on the 360R are invariably high. This is a 360mm liquid cooler and it is completely overkill for a 3600. The temperatures should be somewhere between 30 to 35 degrees over ambient. Now this suggests there was some discrepancy in either the testing methodology or it is a faulty unit. And this was the time I knew I needed help. So I reached out to Sunny from Hardware Mana. He, being kind enough, suggested I vertically mount the radiator and push the pump down manually while testing. Okay, day 2, let me conduct the test. See you after the results.
2 hours later.
Okay, so I got good news. The temperatures did fall. We are looking at a difference of more than 10 degrees Celsius. I also tested this cooler with my 9400F, and the 9400 isn't a very hot running chip. And even this worthless stock cooler keeps it at around 44 degrees over ambient. With this AIO, it topped at around 26 degrees over ambient. Now those are completely acceptable. Okay, now that we have had a look at the temperature testings, let's head over and look at the noise testing results of this cooler. We tested the noise of this cooler by placing a fairly decent Maono AU-A03 20 inches away from the case fans. This will be the standard for every cooler noise test that we do, and it probably won't be comparable with other noise tests on the internet because the distance will be a variable. Also, this is the first AIO test that we are doing on this channel, so I don't have numbers to compare this with any other cooler out there. Anyways, jumping in, the AIO is fairly loud. Now this is something which you should expect. You are installing 3 case fans. It will be loud. You are not going the Noctua route. In that scenario, these are fairly decent numbers. In the 2000 RPM mode, this cooler does make a lot of noise, and considering the difference of just 1 degree, I think I will stick to the auto mode for a practical daily usage scenario. Okay, now let us have a look at the highlight of this AIO, the noise reducer cable. Installing it is fairly simple. Just connect it between the pin on your motherboard and the 4-pin PWM splitter. And a very good inclusion from MSI is a PWM to a Molex converter. Although very rare, some motherboards do not have a second PWM header. In that scenario, this cable will save your day and help you run your fans. Sweet! Now MSI did mention noise reducer on this cable, but they did not mention PWM reducer on it. So I guess the noise reducing aspect of this cooler is because it sabotages the RPM. I got graphs. The only noticeable difference with the noise reducer cable is in the silent mode and the full speed mode, and in both of these modes, the RPM is butchered. In every other mode, the difference of 1 decibel isn't worth it. I would prefer 100 RPM over a single decibel of quietness. Getting into the thermal imprint test, the results do prove the point of inadequate AM4 mounting mechanism. The thermal imprint of the Ryzen 5 3600 is not evenly distributed. We can see a huge portion of the cold plate towards the bottom is empty, which clearly shows that the 2-point mounting mechanism isn't enough. In Intel, the thermal paste has almost evenly spread across the cold plate. There are 2 points in these 2 corners where the thermal paste is absent, but that might have been caused due to improper screwing while mounting the cooler. I think the shape of the cold plate is causing the problems here. It may not be optimized for the concave shape of the AMD processors. As Intel ones are convex, this cold plate might just suit better there. After this test, I might think twice before recommending this cooler to an AMD user. Okay, so for a wrap, this cooler is different. MSI did break conventions, and this cooler is its embodiment. The temps on it are decent, and some very interesting design decisions do made me rethink this conclusion thrice. Considering the single complaint that I have with this cooler with the AMD mounting mechanism, I gladly award this cooler the Cybertech Talk Silver Award. It got a great price to performance ratio, some very interesting out-of-the-box design decisions, and a very easy installation procedure. Great job, MSI! If you like this video, don't forget to leave a like down there, it really helps out. And I don't really know what video to suggest, do check out our sleeper build video here. It was quite fun.